times, but delegate attendees, please do not forget to submit your feedback forms before you leave. Those are extremely useful for us and extremely appreciated as well. Super helpful for us to just innovate and improve for the next events. So don't forget to do that, please. I'm also happy to announce that we are still on track for completing our mission of executed meetings. As long as we execute properly tomorrow, we will be able to hit our goal and be able to donate $1,000 to the raffle winner's choice of charity. So great job today, guys. We appreciate it. Let's just do it again tomorrow. Thank you. Guys, I'm delighted to introduce you to tonight's superstar here at the Chelsea Harbor Hotel. She is the former Chief Sustainability Officer at Decathlon, Anna Terrell. Please all join me in welcoming Anna.
Thanks so much, Joseph. Hi, everyone. Woo. Good evening. I am very aware that I am standing here in front of you as you are eating your dinner. But it is my very great privilege to do so. I hope you've had a really great start to the first day of the assembly and that the conversations you've been having are both sparking curiosity and conviction. I appreciate that I'm speaking at an event focused on digital supply chain transformation. But this evening, if you'll indulge me whilst you have dinner, I'd like to take a step back and share my thoughts about what it means to lead on sustainability in an age of complexity, about how we hold the line on our values and raise the bar on our ambition, even when the world around us feels unpredictable and, quite frankly, at times overwhelming. I want to do this because the moment we're in right now is tough, really tough, from every angle. Just yesterday, I found myself in a discussion with some brilliant academic minds discussing carbon dioxide removals technology and investment mechanisms to incentivize scale and uptake. Pretty nerdy, I know. But in the background, in the corridor where we were having this discussion, a TV screen flashed up, the rolling news with the latest developments in the Middle East. And in that moment, that discussion felt so small and insignificant. Here we are talking about the role of algae in storing carbon dioxide, and meanwhile, entire nations are in conflict. But in fact, it was a conversation that was anything but small, because it's through those moments of collective exploration that we find solution pathways to achieve some of our stickiest societal issues. Which is why we have to continue to hold space for these moments, no matter how noisy the world around us is. I've spent the last 20 years working with and within organizations to drive transformation that aligns business strategy with long-term social, environmental, and governance outcomes. And over that time, I've witnessed the cyclical nature of the global sustainability agenda, with its peaks and its troughs. From supply chain child labor scandals that engulfed entire sectors in the early to mid-noughties, to technological innovations such as blockchain that have unlocked our ability to follow complex global commodities around the world and create new markets. When I look back over this time, it's hard not to marvel at how far we've come. And yet, sometimes it feels like we're still only getting started. So let me start with a provocation. We are living in the most consequential decade of our lifetime when it comes to sustainability. Not because we haven't known what needs to be done, but because we are finally reckoning with the cost of our inaction. Before I dive into the practicalities of leadership, I'd like to take a step back and ask, why does sustainability matter now more than ever? What's changed in the last few years that makes this moment so pivotal? To answer this, we have to start with what I'm calling the sustainability imperative. Let's be clear. Sustainability is no longer a nice to have. It's a commercial, reputational, and moral imperative. The science is unequivocal. The social contract is shifting. And the expectations of our stakeholders, be they customers, investors, regulators, and colleagues, they're rising, albeit often in quite fragmented ways. And this is where we need to be cautious, because it's really easy to say, particularly today, that ESG is dead, or that sustainability isn't a priority for consumers or investors or governments. The reality is, though, that it's not that straightforward. Whilst we are ultimately seeing some rollback or softening across markets, we are in the same breath seeing greater investment in new technologies and innovations, stronger groundswells from communities, affected peoples, and younger generations who want their voices to be heard, and increasingly consumers demanding more transparency and accountability from businesses and brands. Joseph mentioned that my last role was as Chief Sustainability Officer at Decathlon, which is the world's largest sporting goods retailer. But before that, I'd spent nearly a decade in the food industry, in FMCG and in retail at Nestle and at Tesco. And I really have seen it. I've seen the data, I've received the tweets and the letters from school children, from adults alike, increasingly sharing their expectations with me and with the companies that I work for. And here's the challenge. As companies, we are still being asked to deliver more, faster, and with greater transparency, all whilst navigating a world that feels increasingly unpredictable. That's not just a tall order, that's a systemic tension. And it's one that we've got to learn to hold. This tension is playing out in real time. As you all know, in the US, deregulatory moves under the second Trump administration, including efforts to dismantle climate protections and reverse plastic bans, have created uncertainty for companies trying to plan long term. Here in Europe, the first wave of CSRD disclosures has placed sustainability reporting under intense scrutiny, with many businesses struggling to meet new data and assurance requirements, whilst political shifts risk undermining the very legislation and regulation they have previously pushed for. In this turbulence, it's really difficult to know which way is up. And meanwhile, biodiversity loss continues at alarming rates, and water pollution incidents, like those affecting UK rivers right now, highlight the gap between policy ambition and on-the-ground enforcement. These aren't abstract risks. They're active headwinds that challenge even the most committed organizations to stay the course. In 2024, we experienced the hottest year on record, according to data we've been collecting since the 1880s. That's not speculation, that's science. And one of the results of that changing climate are increased extreme weather events. If we take 2024 again, it's conservatively estimated that extreme weather events cost the global economy over $380 billion. That's just last year alone. This figure includes the economic toll from hurricanes, from floods, from wildfires, and heat waves that struck across continents and particularly severely impacted places like the United States, China, India, and parts of Africa and Europe. If we extend this time horizon to the past decade, we can see that climate-related extreme weather events have cost the world over $2 trillion. That's highlighting a rising trend in both frequency and severity. These events are not just potentially disruptive, they threaten to rewrite the way we live and thrive as societies. Now, I don't say this to be dramatic, but rather to illustrate the point that sustainability really is no longer optional. It's essential. But understanding the why is only the beginning. The real challenge lies in navigating the how, especially when the systems we operate in are under strain. We often talk about externalities in sustainability: climate change, biodiversity loss, water stress, social injustice. But let's be clear, these are no longer external. They are internal, operational, financial, existential. They live in our supply chains, in our boardrooms, in our consumer data. And these externalities, they are converging. For example, events like the COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical tensions have spotlighted how fragile and interdependent global supply chains are. Externalities such as exploitative labor practices, emissions from transportation, and water use, they're no longer isolated issues. They are interwoven with social justice, resilience planning, and investor expectations. Another example, speaking to this audience, is the rapid growth of AI, data centers, and digital infrastructure, which is creating a sharp collision between technological progress and sustainability limits. Energy usage, rare mineral extraction, and e-waste have emerged as critical pinch points, pressing for innovation in circular economy models and clean energy solutions. And yet, the current backdrop, cost of living crises, inflationary headwinds, and growing political polarization, has exposed the fragility of these systems many of us once assumed to be robust. This year alone, we've seen very, very mixed signals. CSRD and the SEC's new climate rules, they are major steps forward for transparency. But at the same time, we've seen backpedaling on climate in multiple markets, from watered-down building regulations here in the UK to subsidy rollbacks elsewhere in Europe. And yet, against this backdrop, the sustainability agenda, it hasn't diminished. It's become more urgent, more central, and frankly, more scrutinized. What we're seeing is a world where the boundaries between environmental, social, and economic issues are dissolving. Complexity is the new normal. And in that complexity, leadership becomes not just about strategy, but about conviction. So, how do we lead when the path forward isn't always clear? I think we need to talk about values. When the world gets noisy, values matter more, not less. In the last 18 months, I've seen companies quietly but powerfully double down on their long-term commitments, even as the temptation to backtrack has grown louder. I've also seen companies repackage their sustainability strategies just to ensure that they're able to best weather current political storms in some markets. And for balance, I've also seen a handful of companies go the other way and step back from their strategies. Nothing is ever all or nothing, but overwhelmingly, I can confidently say that sustainability isn't going anywhere. Because here's the truth. When the narrative shifts from growth at all costs to growth at the right cost, sustainability becomes a boardroom issue, not a side conversation, not a marketing exercise, but central to the resilience, trust, and license to operate of an organization. And today, one thing is for sure, and that is that resilience is the name of the game. Be it resilient trading relationships between countries, resilient business performance in turbulent markets, healthy and resilient communities in the face of changing climate, or resilient supply chains rewired to secure safe and sustainable future supply of goods and services, not hampered by geopolitical crises and shocks that we face today. When values guide action, we begin to see a shift, from reactive compliance to proactive transformation. But transformation isn't just about doing more of the same, it's about changing the rules of the game. One of the most overused but least understood phrases in our space is systems change. It sounds sweeping and abstract, a TED Talk soundbite. But it's deeply practical. Systems change means rethinking the rules that shape our behavior, incentives, and choices. Let me give you an example. Here in the UK, in Nottingham, a city, the City Council has introduced a workplace parking levy. Businesses pay a charge for each parking space they provide. That revenue, it funds public transport improvements. The result, higher public transit usage, lower emissions, more equitable access to mobility. That's systems change, local, tangible, and replicable. And it's not just cities. In Kenya, mobile money platforms have enabled micro-solar financing for rural households. That's systems change. Technology meeting need, innovation meeting equity. It's also a reminder that we don't need to wait for perfect conditions to act. Innovation is often born from constraint. Whether you're a global multinational or a local government with tight budgets, it's mindset and intent that creates momentum. These examples show us that system change is not abstract. It's deeply local, deeply human, and often surprisingly achievable. But to drive that change, we need leaders who can operate across boundaries and lead with humility and humanity. Being a sustainability leader today means living in the tension between pragmatism and idealism. And I say that almost viscerally, physically, because I feel it every day. Between ambition and constraint. It means influencing without always having positional authority and bringing others along when you don't have all the answers. But it also means learning to speak more than one language. The language of finance, of operations, of marketing, of policy. Because embedding sustainability isn't just about changing what we do, it's about changing how we think. And it's a role that all of us can and should be playing, champions of change. I want to share a practical example of how change can be embedded across organizational boundaries and into the murkier world of global supply chains. If we consider IKEA's I-Way standards for a moment, by embedding environmental and social standards into their global supplier contracts, IKEA didn't just ensure compliance, they raised the industry bar. And they used their scale to create a ripple effect across markets. We took this approach when I was at Tesco as well, focusing on driving scalable change through our supplier networks, recognizing that our biggest opportunity to influence was through our commercial relationships and how we could achieve greatest impact by activating them. That's not top-down governance. That's influence leveraged with accountability, and that is critical. At this point, you might be thinking, oh, that all sounds great, but so what? This is a million miles away from my life or my job, you know. But is it really? Leadership is always about choices. And for all of us in our daily lives, we have the agency, fortunately, to make choices, whether we are conscious of that or not. With that in mind, I'd like you just to take a moment to reflect on some of the choices you've made in the last year. Think back over the last 12 months in your organization or in your personal journey and identify a moment where you saw values win over convenience. Perhaps it was a decision that cost more but was aligned with purpose. Maybe it was saying no to greenwashing, or perhaps it was starting something you weren't 100% ready for, but you knew mattered. Reflect on that particular moment and on how it made you feel. Because these moments, they matter. They shape culture, they build trust, and they create momentum. They remind us that behind every strategy, there are people. People making difficult, values-driven decisions. And as we know, values, they matter, perhaps now more than ever before. Now, I can't talk about leadership without turning to something that often dominates the conversation: metrics. How do we measure progress without losing sight of purpose? Well, she says, the trick is not to let metrics define the narrative. Yes, we need robust data. Yes, we need science-based targets. But let's not mistake metrics for meaning. If your sustainability strategy fits neatly into an Excel spreadsheet, it's probably not ambitious enough. Sorry to disappoint. This isn't to dismiss measurement, quite the opposite. We need credible guardrails, but we also need to honor the stories behind those numbers, because no one was ever inspired by a bar graph. Apologies to any quants in the room who I might have offended. People, us, we are inspired by courage, by vision, and the impact that we can see in our companies, in our communities, and in our daily lives. And in 2025, with AI and big data now central to sustainability strategies, we've got to ensure that technology serves purpose, not just performance. We must ask, are we using data to illuminate the path forward or to justify the status quo? An interesting example of this that I quite like is UPS's Orion tool, which stands for On-Road Integrated Optimization and Navigation. It's a data-driven initiative that optimized delivery routes across the US. What began as a cost efficiency project turned into one of the largest fuel saving and emissions reduction efforts in the private sector at the time. Over 100 million gallons of fuel saved annually. That data-driven initiative turned out to be a strategically significant one for the business's bottom line, as well as for its sustainability goals. But let's not forget, the most transformative sustainability stories, they often begin with a question, not with a KPI. A question like, what if we designed waste out of our system entirely? Or what if we treated nature as a stakeholder and not a resource? Questions drive innovation, and innovation drives action. So yes, data matters, but meaning matters more. And meaning, that is often co-created, not in isolation, but in partnership. Which brings us to one of the most powerful forces available to us today: collaboration. If I had to boil the next era of sustainability down to one principle, it would be this: collaboration is not optional. I cannot underscore that enough. Collaboration is not optional. Look at the climate transition plans of financial institutions. Despite market softening, many institutions can still continue to move capital into ESG or sustainability-aligned portfolios. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because risk-adjusted returns increasingly demand it. The insurance industry is a brilliant example of being massively behind the curve and suddenly finding itself in a situation where its very being is being questioned because of some of the assumptions that it's made previously to do with the climate and the natural world. But even these companies, these stakeholders, they can't act alone. I'm going to state the obvious, but policy has to support markets. Data must be interoperable. Regulation must enable long-term thinking. And that is where we face headwinds today. Here in Europe, we're seeing a raft of sustainability-related regulation that was put on the books during peacetime now at risk of being thrown out entirely in favor of a more simplified political focus. As I mentioned earlier, the re-election of Donald Trump has brought an arguably even stronger wave of deregulatory action to the US. But even here, in these kind of darker moments, we're seeing states and cities step up, just as they did during the first Trump administration. In California, for example, local governments are pushing forward with aggressive decarbonization targets, regardless of federal policy. In Germany, despite political shifts, coalitions of businesses and civil society are holding the line on climate ambition. Because the reality is that net zero and its transition is just too complex to work in silos. We need pre-competitive alliances. We also need radical transparency. And yes, we need to embrace the discomfort of shared accountability. Let me give you a practical example from my decathlon days, and that's the Fashion Pact. Over 60 global brands have come together to tackle climate, biodiversity, and ocean protection, largely from the textile and apparel industry and the sporting goods industry. Now, these companies, these brands, they compete fiercely in the marketplace, but they've recognized that on sustainability, collaboration is the only way forward. I know this firsthand from my time at Decathlon, where the only way to enable the production of truly circular textiles products is to co-invest alongside other companies to build the reprocessing technology required to generate sufficient recycled feedstock. Without this technology, none of us would have the supply needed to make textile-to-textile products. It's that simple. And as much as there are examples of companies going it alone, when it comes to delivering change at scale, it's a question of everyone or no one. Another example of strong pre-competitive collaboration, again, something that's been that I was actively involved in during my time at Nestle and Tesco, it was a Consumer Goods Forum, which has a number of coalitions of action, which I'm sure some of you in the room or your companies are involved in. And those coalitions of action cross-cut diverse topics from human rights to eliminating deforestation or driving up consistent supply chain standards. Collaboration is hard. It requires trust, transparency, and a willingness to share credit. And not every company is up for that. But it's also where the magic happens, where we move from incrementalism to transformation. And despite the challenges, I remain hopeful. And I'm going to explain to you why. I'm often asked whether I feel optimistic about the future. The honest answer, it depends on what Donald Trump has tweeted overnight. No, in all seriousness, despite the pushback, the politics, the paradoxes of the current moment we find ourselves in, I'm absolutely not without hope. Not blind hope, not passive optimism, but grounded, realistic hope, born from what I see in the detail. I see employees quietly pushing their companies to go further, even when they don't have titles or budgets. I see partnerships forming between competitors on issues like deforestation or recycling solutions. I see companies like Microsoft internalizing the cost of carbon because waiting for the perfect global price would take too long. I see farmers shifting to regenerative agriculture, often with no guarantee of short-term gain. I see product designers rethinking materials from the ground up because their personal convictions and passion drive them forward. I see entire companies asking themselves, not just how do we grow, but how do we grow responsibly? And I see a generation entering the workforce with a moral clarity and impatience for change that we would do well to learn from, not resist. Younger employees demanding not just inclusion, but authenticity. not just corporate strategies, but personal accountability. This generational shift also extends to consumers, who are starting to use their purchasing power to signal to companies and brands about what they want and expect to see. For people like me, the results are exciting. For example, Patagonia's repair and resale programs, they are thriving. Young customers don't just want sustainable products, they expect them now. And they're reshaping the very notion of value. During my time at Decathlon, we saw exponential growth in our circular products, driven by a convergence of value, efficiency, and sustainability. This growth far outstripped that of traditional linear products and continues to do so right now as we speak. That kind of generational pressure, that kind of energy is very hard to replicate. And it's what keeps me going, even on the days when this work feels unrelenting. And let's be honest, those days definitely exist. Hope, then, it's not soft, it's strategic, it's a discipline, it's the decision to show up, speak truth, and stay the course, even when the path isn't linear. So, where do we go from here? Well, I think we lead. We hold the line on our values. We raise the bar on our ambition, and we embrace the discomfort that comes with change. Let's not pretend that this is easy. It's not. But it is necessary. And it is possible. Let's commit to the kind of leadership that doesn't wait for permission, that doesn't settle for the path of least resistance, that dares to imagine and build a better future. Because if there's one thing this moment demands, it's leadership rooted in conviction, not convenience. So, as you turn back to your dinners and your table conversations, let me leave you with this. Transformation is messy. It's imperfect. And it doesn't happen all at once. But it starts with clarity. It grows with courage. And it endures through community. Thank you very much. So I think we have some time for Q&A. If anyone does have any questions, you may have none, in which case enjoy your evenings. But I'm very happy to take them, if so. We have a converted room. This is incredible. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. If you do have any questions or comments or would like to chat, I will be around for a little bit. And I'm also on LinkedIn, as are we all these days. And I wish you a very, very successful and enjoyable rest of the assembly. And thanks so much for giving me some time and attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Anna. Appreciate that. That was phenomenal. Thank you. As you guys are eating, I just did want to mention that after dinner, the bar is open outside, right outside of this gala room. So I hope you guys enjoy your meals, but you do have an open bar waiting for you after dinner as well. Tomorrow, just a reminder, breakfast will begin at 8:30 in the morning. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of coffee for you. So don't think about that tonight. Also, we ask, if not extending your stay, please bring your luggage down with you tomorrow morning. We'll store it for the rest of the day, so you don't have to worry about that. But just get everything out of your room then, so we have it downstairs, and we'll take care of it for you. But guys, enjoy your dinner. Still a lot of night left. Thank you again for a phenomenal first day.